when you think of elder care as a bucket of things of planning, elder care is not sexy. People really look at it like, oh my God, I don't want to do that. It's full of stress, and they have these preconceptions when they come in to look at this type of planning. Whereas because I'm a planner, I can break it down for people and say, okay, no, like your budget is going to be helpful for like 6 conversations. Do your budget. What do you want to do? Do you want to prepare your funeral arrangements so your kids don't have to deal with it? Like there's very pieceworky things that you can do that take it off your plate and you feel better about it. But I think it's getting people to broach it in on purpose and put time aside, because the time that people put aside will get eaten by something else because they're not looking at it as something fun to do.
Hello and welcome to episode 128 of Toward a Better Life. It's a podcast that features like-minded people sharing their stories, ideas, and activities on what can be done to generate a better life individually and collectively. In today's world, there truly is a need to seek balance, harmony, compassion, kindness on so many levels. It includes personally, culturally, spiritually, to name some of them, but it all begins with each one of us individually, making individual decisions, individual ideas, individualized care for ourselves, and it just keeps going on and on. But doing so to make these changes makes life better for all of us. And that's what I like to share on this podcast from around the world, seeking others of the same spirit, heart, and mind. It's a platform, a school, a venue to begin and continue your journey toward wholeness and harmony. I also offer the opportunity for people to share their prose, music, poetry, and storytelling on the show, as many of you have heard already from the past episodes. Please do subscribe to the program if you haven't done so already through your favorite podcast platform, and keep following for weekly magical insights into earth-based spirituality, self-development, self-care. Also, remember to support the program by leaving your review on Apple and Spotify podcasts. Only takes a moment to leave a review. And please visit my website, towardabetterlife.com. You can also contact me to learn more about a free discovery call to help you begin or continue your journey toward a better life. Send all inquiries to me, Kevin, at towardabetterlife.com. So on with the discussion, the chat, if you will. We're going to be discussing a potentially difficult subject for families in this episode of Toward a Better Life: better leaving for senior care. What's best for the elders in our lives, whether parents, or other relatives? Working with seniors, finding ongoing care, long-term care, skilled nursing can all be difficult. In the U.S. alone, here's something to think about. Those that are 50 and over make up 34% of the population. That's today's numbers. And this number continues to grow due to the aging of the baby boomer generation. That percentage is expected to rise even more so in the next 2 decades as that same generation ages. As this elder population grows larger, thoughts, decisions, and discussions are needed to address, and quickly. Now, fortunately, there are people out there like Amy Friesen that can assist with answers and recommendations that can be fruitful for all concerned. Amy is a renowned expert in senior care with over 20 years of experience, helping families navigate the complex maze of elder care decisions. As the founder of Tea and Toast, Amy has dedicated her career to simplifying senior living options and providing personalized, compassionate guidance. Her deep understanding of the emotional, financial, and logistical challenges faced by caregivers makes her insights invaluable for those struggling to care for their loved ones. Amy's innovative approaches to aging in place and caregiver burnout prevention have made her a sought-after speaker and media guest from around the world. She's a wealth of information and is shared from a place of true compassion. So settle back and join me for my chat with Amy Friesen as we discuss beneficial senior care. Today, we're going to be talking about senior care and senior planning on this episode of Toward a Better Life with Amy Friesen from Ontario. Good day, Amy. Nice to see
Hi.
you.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. So Amy has a Tea and Toast podcast, And she has some really good information on that, and she has some really good information to share. And it's a little bit of a twist from what we typically get into with Toward a Better Life. But, ultimately, Amy, I can see that this is also toward a better life. And sometimes people would say, as times roll down, how much of a better life can you have? And I can tell you that for me personally, as well as others, it would probably say this above 50, above 60, and beyond. Life really does get really cool for me, and I hope it does for other people. And you probably see it, don't you?
We see all sorts of different things, really. And I think that when people look at aging and senior care and elder care, all of these like transferable terminology, I always look at it as the next chapter of what people are doing. And I think that although some people are kind of scared about senior as a word and elder care as a word, I look at it as planning their future as their next chapter. And we all are going to be there. We all are aging. So I think that let's talk about it.
Yeah, we can't get away from it, can we?
Unfortunately, we can't.
we
Um,
we can try. But I know that a lot of times people look at me and they try to get an idea about how old I am, and people here that listen to the podcast have kind of put the pieces together. But a lot of times people would say, "How old are you?" And I tell them, and I say, "Well, it is really a matter of one thing as far as I'm concerned, and that is staying active. And it's not only physical activity, but also mental activity. If we let either one of those go, I've seen people that are 10, 15, even 20 years younger than I am that are not in good condition. And I'm not talking about people that may have had an event in their life, like a stroke or heart attack or something that has really put a curveball into their lifestyle, but people that are just normally living and all of a sudden it just takes a nosedive.
I
And,
would,
you know,
I would say, in addition to both staying mentally and physically well, would be socially well. We
thank you.
saw a lot during the pandemic where people were just isolated, and we saw what happened afterwards in my business specifically. People had a lot more cognitive issues. It was hard to get people back in the flow of things. And I think that this isolation really affected a lot. So I would say staying socially well too, even though I'm an introvert by trade. I do see that, interacting with others and, getting out of your house and doing something and being involved does add quite a lot to people's lives.
When you say introvert, it's interesting because I read something not too long ago that it has itself to the idea of introvert by choice. And that is where you choose who you want to associate with and you just don't associate with others.
Fair enough. I'm a little bit of that, I would say, but I think
Uh-huh.
for me too, like COVID made me more introverted, but just by nature, I just, a lot of energy around is overwhelming for me. So I just stick to myself and a couple of people otherwise.
I know I had someone on the podcast a year or so back, and she's very, very much involved with the social aspects of seniors. And I'm actually going to be seeing one of those folks later today. And I don't know why I didn't say that in the first place about social interactions, because that is her big thing, that lady that I talked with before, Marianne Kilkenny. And Marianne is talked about how important it is just to keep people engaged. Here
Mhm.
in the States, for an example, we have something called the OLLI program, and I don't know if you have anything in Canada that's like that, but the short of it is it's like a senior education program, adult ed program for seniors, and it's where you keep yourself engaged, not only the part that I was talking about mentally, but because you're together, you have the opportunity to interact with other people of the same age. And
Mhm.
it's really a cool program. And the Ollie program, they have all sorts of stuff. They have stuff that is of a spiritual nature. They have stuff that's of a crafting nature. They have stuff that it's financial planning, all kinds of stuff like that. And it's just stay engaged, everybody. Don't pull back, right?
I think that people, as we age, we don't think about it as much because a lot of people lose their spouse or their partner. A lot of people maybe don't live close to their family as it is because a lot of our families are spread out as well. And I think that all of it, like physically, mentally, and socially, for instance, I think all of it, you really need to make extra efforts and try to. And so that social piece, people will, stay at home and say, oh, I'm just going to watch my show or I'm going to read a book or whatever, which is fine. But there is that little bit of connection that really does help people's health um, when they're trying to, age gracefully, really.
Yeah. So one of the things that we look at as we kind of are going down this pathway, and something that keeps coming to mind, and it is the difficult conversation. And, in a perfect world, I say a perfect world, the old ways I used to talk about was, you know, the person, if they got older, they just simply stayed with the rest of the family. And there are even cultures today that still have that same mindset of they stay with the family. And I'm talking about different countries, different places, how they do things and so forth. And yet sometimes I recognize that is not the best alternative for someone who is, say, they are in need of particular care. And sometimes that family cannot care for that person's health needs because of an incident or something that has taken place. So let's start off with an idea. Where do you go and how do you begin that conversation that you would have with a senior? Because as the adult child, you kind of need to take the reins and say, okay, mom or dad, uh, you really do need to, we love you, but we need to figure out where we're going to go and how we're going to proceed. So, can you tell us a little bit about how you begin that conversation?
For sure. And I think that just before that as well, I think that there's probably a lot of families who have tried to have these types of conversations, but didn't come at them in a, what I would call a proper way. They came at them in kind of a scrappy way, or it ended up in sort of a fight. And then, so then on top of just having this initial really awkward conversation, the hard conversations of elder care, really, sometimes you're trying to do that on top of some layers of problematic conversations. And don't forget that when adult children are trying to start these conversations, even if they're fresh, it does include a bit of a role reversal where they're kind of in the parenting type of seat. Not saying that the senior adult is a child, but they're trying to help plan for them and all that. And so all of the dynamics are a little bit messed up and a little bit shifted. And so that leads to discomfort, that leads to maybe some people shutting down and not wanting to have the conversation. So it's really important that if you haven't had these conversations, to start them right. And if you have had them and they haven't been successful, maybe go back to the drawing board and start, thinking about it in a different way. And
Okay.
so one of the main things I always say is don't spring these conversations on someone. And so
Hmm.
I've had people say, "Oh, well, I told my mom she smells bad. Was that wrong?" And it's like, "Yes, that's wrong. Don't do that." And in all honesty, too, it's going to be a sensitive conversation. And so you don't want to be sitting down to Christmas meal with a family and be like, "Let's talk about your care, mom and dad." Like you want to really plan it out. Let's set a date, let's set a time, let's set expectations of, I see this concern and I'd really love to talk to you about it because I'm worried about your health. Can we meet Monday at lunch? I'll bring lunch, I'll come to you. Set the parameters of it. If you're working with someone who is cognitively well, give them a couple of days so that they can think about what that might look like. If your concern is their stairs, then they can think about it while they're waiting for that time with you to say, oh, I do agree, or they start to pay attention to it so they can contribute to the conversation. If you're talking to someone who has cognitive issues, then don't give them that much time because we don't want them stewing
Hmm.
because they don't have the cognitive ability anymore, depending on where they are in that transition. So limit the amount, maybe call them Monday morning and say, hey, I'm going to come over in 2 hours and limit the information, but still set it up so that they're not super caught off guard, but it's a bit trickier with cognitive decline.
Okay.
I also am a big fan of acknowledging the awkwardness of the conversation. I've had, even in my own life, I've talked about it with my husband or whatnot, because there's awkward conversations all over life.
Yeah.
And, if you start with the goal and say, okay, my goal is to do this, then it's okay to say, Mom, I know this is a really awkward conversation. I feel awkward. It's uncomfortable. I know that you probably do. Let's just like hash it out for a minute. Let's get it over with and like, we'll go do something else, right? And it's really about like, let's get down to business, let's solve the problem and move on. So that people don't always, you know, there's a lot of people that instead of just kind of voicing the awkwardness about it, would go in it, but you can feel it. If you can feel the body language or the energy of the person, you can feel it anyway. So let's just talk about it anyway and just say it out loud because really none of these types of conversations are easy. When you talk about your parents' incontinence, when you talk about your parents falling or physical mobility or funeral planning or moving to retirement or long-term care, all of it's difficult because essentially what you're trying to do is kind of role reverse and get your loved one who may be ingrained in their own habits and routines for 50 plus years to do something different. And we
Mm.
all know how that goes in our own life, right? Like it's a whole motivational switch. And so I think it's really important just to say out loud, like, this is just awkward. Let's, like, we're same team. Let's just talk about it together and then we'll move on and we'll do something fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the other things as well is really about active listening
Hmm.
and reading body language. This is really important, specifically when you're dealing with cognitive decline, reading the body language because they might not remember. And so when we help clients that are looking to tour retirement homes, for instance, and they have cognitive decline and we're with them and their adult children, we're paying attention to what the senior in that case is doing and saying so that we can say, okay, your mom really liked this home, but she did not like that home. And we
Hmm.
can read it. But if we talk about it later, they may not remember. And so just kind of paying attention to what's saying, repeat what they said. I hear you saying this. Is this correct? Handle those objections in the moment. And then the other last thing would be really about empathy and
Hmm.
and open, non-judgmental communication. So, your loved one is going to be coming from a different frame of reference than you. And so your loved one may, their frame of reference may be about not talking about mental health, right? Lots of mental health talk did not happen until recently. And so a lot of people grew up not talking about that or not talking about money or not talking about any of that. So really try to open it up, but not judging. Oh, saying something like, oh, mom, you have lots of money, you can spend it. That's not the problem, right? That's not the objection. The objection is I've lived through a depression. I'm going to hoard all my money because I need it just in case. That's
Hmm.
the objection, not that they have lots of money to spend because, I've talked to different families that was exactly it. They had lots of money. They had a house and assets and all sorts of stuff. But they didn't handle the actual objection because they weren't empathizing with what the frame of reference might have been.
Hmm. There you go. There's so many questions that I've got now. Where do we start?
Just dive right in.
Well, no, I mean everything that you've shared is so on spot and on point. I really do appreciate it, Amy, and we do because no one, like you said, likes to have this kind of a conversation, and there are difficult conversations all around us all the time. And the best thing to do is, like you said, just get into it. But I think too, like you said, if it's something, and this can be applied not only to senior care, but interpersonal relationships. If it's a touchy enough situation, don't just spring it on people, but give it some opportunity. And like you said, give it the opportunity to consider where are they in a cognitive sense, because some people, even a I'm going to say a semi-normal person, we would think. But if they're all over the place anyway, like if they're ADHD and you tell them, we need to talk about something, next Wednesday at 3 o'clock. Well, between now and next Wednesday, depending on how they're wired, they could have 11 different ways to get apprehensive, to
Mhm.
express fear, to get nervous, to get awkward, because they really don't know what you've got in mind. So,
Mhm.
yeah, consider where that person is, not where you think they should be. But along the same lines, it came to mind is that this probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this probably has the potential of being more than one meeting.
I would hope so. I mean,
Yeah.
in general, if you're looking at just elder care, and to your point before, we're having awkward conversations all throughout life, but there's also a lot of sandwich generation caregivers caregiving for their parents and their kids, and they're having all sorts of awkward conversations. They've got the birds and the bees and like funeral arrangements and like all different stuff, right? So it can be very challenging.
Yeah. So more than one meeting for sure. And
Yeah.
keeping in mind that even though you're giving some ways to look at some of these things, we should also understand that each situation is different. Each person is different.
Hmm.
I know of someone, for an example, that the person is well and is into their 90s. They're living alone. They have some healthcare issues. The place that they live in is nice. And yet there's no real need for them to move into a long-term care facility because they have a relative that comes in on a regular basis. They don't have any real nursing needs, so it works that way. On the other hand, you may have somebody that's 65 or 70 or whatever, or 50 something, and they have maybe the beginnings of dementia. Maybe they have a situation of maybe it could be MS. It could be any kind of a medical thing that says, no, this person needs a little bit more than a relative to come over 2 or 3 times a week and spend the night. They need someone there all the time. And this is the stuff that you would get into in conversations, and you don't know if you don't know, right?
Well, and I think that that's also why I always encourage people to have these conversations, but at the end of the conversation, book a relook at the situation. Okay, we'll relook or re-have a conversation in 6 months, or if this changes or that happens or whatnot.
Mhm.
And I always encourage caregivers to not leave a conversation at the end, just like, okay, we've had this conversation. You need to constantly revisit it. So even though people are different, and so different conversations at different times all the time, but we change ourselves. And just to your point, right? We may be independent today, but all of a sudden we may need care tomorrow. And so you need to keep the door open of the conversation so that it becomes a bit more of a flow as opposed to a blocked in awkward conversation. So once you've got the first one, we're going to say, like, let's revisit this in 3 months. I just want to check to see how you're doing because I was concerned about fall risks. And I just want to make sure if our new plan's working or if we need to change it. If something happens in the meantime, let me know. We'll talk about it. And that way, it really opens the door for ongoing conversations that aren't so steeped in awkwardness constantly.
So where do we go as far as what criteria do we want to look at? And the criteria that I'm referencing is when do we know when we should have these conversations?
I
Is
think
there
if you're
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was going to say, I think if you're thinking about them, it's time to have them. So if you're, because there's so many different ones, right? Like in some of my presentations and stuff, I've laid out about 10 of them, even down to driver's license, right? That's an awkward conversation, but there's many other ones. And so they all don't happen at once, but if you start picking away at them, there's things that you can plan for, like when you're younger, like if you're a younger senior at 65 or whenever this happens, you may be in perfect health, but the conversation you could have for pre-planning is what are you going to do when you die? Do you want to do a pre-planned funeral? Do you want to do X? The other conversations you can have in planning is what is your plan for housing? What do you want to move to a retirement, long-term care, skilled nursing, or do you want to stay at home? And if so, how do we make that work? These are types of conversations you can have early at any time because the goal is to revisit. And
Hmm.
so starting to get this template of what might happen in the next couple of years or the next 10, 15 years, depending, also really sets you up that if you've already started having these conversations early and often enough, that if something happens and someone ends up in a crisis, they fall, they break a hip, they do something, then you're not having them from scratch in a hospital room. You already have started them. And that's the whole purpose of planning with anything. You've already started the conversations. You might not have it 100%, but you've got a layout. You've got a template to follow. You may have to fill in some blanks, but you're not starting from scratch. Well, your loved one and yourself are in this crisis.
Yeah, because you get into conversations too about, gee, when should I write a will? Well,
Now,
if you're thinking
please.
about it, you should you should do it. And shame on us. It took us a while, but we have a will, both of us, and we sat down with the attorney. We did our thing, and does it need to be updated? Yeah, but it's there. The
There's
foundation
something.
is there. The basics are there. The end of life care, things like the DNR, for an example, do not
Yeah.
resuscitate. All those things, and what comes to mind, Amy, is, and I think you're saying it too, you already did, if you're thinking about it, do it. But the other piece of that is definitely, as you say, prepare for it ahead of time. And the
Mhm.
last piece that I'm thinking about is what's most important in my mind is have the conversation when you are healthy, when you are cognitively there, and everything is really good. And you mentioned it as well in the sense of, you don't want to wait until the person's in the hospital with intubation tubes and everything else coming out of them when they can't communicate. You want to do
Well,
it ahead of time.
and have the conversation when it's, not a challenge, when things aren't so difficult that you just have to dig out of holes to have them. So, to your point as well, wills are great to have. Everybody needs a will, but power of attorney is more important because it's living, right? And so
Mhm.
things like your power of attorney for financing care and your advanced directives and stuff really set the stage. I saw a stat the other day that only 35% of Canadians have their powers of attorney done. For
Wow.
me, in my field, that's not good. I mean,
Right.
there's lots of, it's not good because the thing is that even if we were just to look at the folks with dementia that have cognitive issues, whether it's dementia or caused by a stroke or whatever it is, um, and I face this in my own family, if you don't have your legal paperwork done and are deemed incompetent of making decisions, nothing can change. And so you have to have it up to date so that if that is happening, it's up to date as close as possible because once the decision that you can't make decisions is made, then you can't change your POAs, you can't change your wills or any of that. And if you're in the same boat and you haven't done any of those, here it gets complicated because then you get involved with the government and the, guardian and trust and things like that. That is just much more complicated. And so I have lots of caregivers that, don't want to plan. And I say
Mm.
to them, planning in steps over years is much easier than the other side of the coin, which is planning, which isn't planning anymore, just doing in action in crisis immediately and probably within like 2 weeks. And so there's a huge difference. But people think it's going to be less painful if they just wait. Oh, we don't need to do that right now. We don't need to do that. And then all of a sudden they need to do it. And we don't see the future. We don't know what's going to happen to any of us.
It's like that thing where we approach different projects and we approach life itself. Do you choose to be proactive or do you choose to be reactive?
Mhm.
And this is definitely proactive. And I love the idea that you mentioned about, so start off with the simple things. I mean, this can be years in advance. This could
Yeah.
be done when they're in their 40s, when you think about some of this stuff. Wills, there's a great example. How many people that are 40 years old have done their wills? There's something for all.
Me, I
Yeah, I know.
count.
But I challenge the listeners for that. How many of you actually have done your will and say well, I mean, I even would say even your 30s. Have you done
Yeah.
your will? And because you don't know, we don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
and what I was saying about the power of attorney as well, it's that the documents themselves to get drawn up, sure, you have to think about a couple of different things, but the power of attorney is really important because although the will helps you after death, if you get into a car accident and you're 30 and you need all this care and you need to do stuff and you can't do things on your own and you need people to act on your benefit, the will does nothing for you. You need to have the power of attorney in. So like I always bundle all three of those together. Like go and do all three of these. Advanced directives are on top of that. Their bonus really is, what do you want to see happen in your life? Do you have things that if the power of attorney is activated that they could look at and be like, oh, they want to take care of this and this, they want the dogs and the cats to go here or whatnot. Like it's more detailed and really you're directing your own life at this
Hmm.
point. So you just don't ever know. We never know when something's going to change, and it's not just for seniors, it's literally for anybody.
Yeah. So you said the three things. I know we've got the power of attorney, a will, and what's the third one?
The advanced directives,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
I
And
kind of
they're
thought
the
that, but yeah.
Yeah, they're more minutia. They're more detailed of, for me with my business, right? I have to have two wills and then I have my powers of attorney. And so I have put in like a living will or kind of advanced directives. They're all in sort of an umbrella term. They're connected of what I want to happen to my business if I can't do it anymore or if I pass away or whatever, because there's other things. But for others, it might be as simple as I want my animals taken care of and not going into a rescue or anything, really.
Hmm. Hmm. So we're really getting into some good stuff here as far as the conversations that we need to have, and I'm beginning to see the age of some of these conversations being reduced a little bit because we're really starting to look at, so how soon can you begin a lot of this?
Mhm.
And sometimes you could begin just as a couple and say, this is, we're just kind of getting together. Where do we go from here? I mean, it's not like right after the wedding, let's have a will, let's have a power of attorney. And not saying that that would be a bad thing, but it's not necessarily something you want to focus on.
It's not, Kevin, it's not sexy to talk about legal documents. It's
It's
just not.
not? Come
It's
on.
not, and nobody is interested in it. And that's the thing. And I think that that's why it's harder to get people's head around. It's kind of like eldercare. When you think of eldercare as a bucket of things of planning, eldercare is not sexy. People really look at it like, oh my God, I don't want to do that. It's full of stress, and they have these preconceptions when they come in to look at this type of planning. Whereas because I'm a planner, I can break it down for people and say, okay, no, like your budget is going to be helpful for like 6 conversations. Do your budget. What do you want to do? Do you want to prepare your funeral arrangements so your kids don't have to deal with it? Like there's very pieceworky things that you can do that take it off your plate and you feel better about it. But I think it's getting people to broach it on purpose and put time aside, because the time that people put aside will get eaten by something else because they're not looking
Oh
at it
yeah.
as something fun to do.
There you go. Something fun to do. Well, we're going to get to your book here in a minute. I want to, but it just occurred to me, what a great title for a book. Making the conversation sexy. Make a
Yeah.
power of attorney sexy.
How
Making the
to.
making yeah, how to make power of attorney sexy.
Yeah.
Say
Well, I'll
what?
have to work on that off the podcast and figure out how to do that because I haven't figured it out yet.
Okay. You'd probably have the line out the door waiting for it. We've had some good stuff here already, Amy. A couple of things. Usually I let the folks introduce themselves right off, but for whatever reason, we kind of took off, and that's not a bad thing. Kidding it really, well, it's like what you're saying. Let's not put these conversations off. Let's move them forward. So that's kind of what we've done with the format of the program today. But that being said, what uh, what led you in to become the founder of Tea and Toast? Because let's talk about Tea and Toast a little bit because, I mean, that's your website, and there's so much on that website for
Yeah.
people. So, first off, how did you get interested in this, and how did you get going Tea and Toast? Two
I
things.
think, for a while, I did some schooling. My background is psychology and marketing as well. Like I did multiple years of university and college, and I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. I'm not one of those people that grew up wanting to be, a firefighter or a doctor or anything. I never really knew. And then I came to a class on the psychology of aging. And so that's where I leaped off of. And I found the retirement community and a marketing piece in there. And so that's what I loved is being able to problem solve for families all of the pieces in senior living that really help them make a very specific decision, right? Whether it's where the budget, what the needs are, what the future needs are, all of the stuff. And so about 11 years ago, because we just celebrated our anniversary, I decided to take a leap in and create Tea and Toast. And my vision for Tea and Toast was one, to have a team that was supported through mental health because there's a lot of caregiver burnout in this field, compassion fatigue, things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
taking care of my team and offering that to the community in general. And then the other piece was it's also taking place with caregivers and seniors. And what I figure out is that, the hardest thing about this type of transition is the education around it. And so, as you mentioned, on teaandtoast.ca, where our hub is of everything, we do in-person services in Ottawa, where I'm at, but we also have a lot of downloads, blogs, educational things there because people are trying to find the information and it's not as readily available. So, before I wrote my book, which is called Breadcrumbs, and it's there as well, I looked into a lot of different authors trying to piece together literally any education in book form that people could get because my theory is that a lot of people maybe don't call us right away. A lot of people are doing a search, like a Google search or an internet search, and they're reading books, and that's a lot of the way people learn. If you look at self-help, for instance, people are buying books and they're reading books and on their own time in their own way. And so that's why I made Breadcrumbs, because I wanted to meet people where they were. And so they could get that information, but in a digestible format when they were ready for it.
Mm.
And so it's just another format of our education and information that we offer. So it's really important for us, although we do lots of services and that's our main business, really to support people educationally as well in this because it's very, very difficult to find.
Mm. So the mission of Tea and Toast, what would you call it if you have a mission for Tea and Toast?
Our mission is really to educate families on elder care so that they are confident in their decision making when it comes to elder care planning or senior living. Generally, that's really what our mission is. And that's mainly because we get a lot of people that come to us in very stressful situations and learning all you need to learn about this type of field and industry is like taking on a full-time job, and none of us have extra time to do that. And so, like other businesses, that's what we do. We specialize in it so that people can breathe and people have confidence knowing that we've walked through this process and we have expertise in it. And so they know, okay, we did make a good decision, because it's nothing worse than we hear from caregivers that are looking for maybe making a move to a retirement home, for instance, that they've looked and they've toured 20 or 30 communities and they move their mom and then they call us and they say, I still don't know if it was the right move. That's the worst feeling because
Mm.
130 tours is way too many. And two, having to go through all of it, people are taking sick leave for months to do this. And
Wow.
so having to go through all of it and then still not be confident in your decision, like I don't want that for anybody.
Yeah, so Tea and Toast is really quite a resource, is what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
We try to be,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Of course, one of the things that I think about too is, I mean, our program is worldwide, and I think about, we're close neighbors here of the U.S. and Canada. Is there any reason why someone in the United States couldn't reach out to Tea and Toast for advice and some insights in
No,
in elder care?
yeah, I feel like we're open to anybody having conversations with us because we also service a world stage as well at Tea and Toast, even though our physical services are in Ottawa, Ontario. We help with elder care planning. We have a lot of people who have seniors or their senior loved ones are here, but they are not.
Mm,
They may be in the States. They may, we're speaking to someone currently over in the UK.
mhm,
We've spoken all across Canada, everywhere. And so it's really to hear what they're having to say and see how we can best direct them. That's also why I started Elder Care Planners of Canada, which is the only association in Canada to go across Canada with elder care planners like myself. So small businesses all together so that people can find the resources. And I'm also connected with a lot of people who do what we do in the States specifically because I've reached out and expanded my network. And so sometimes people are looking for something and they can only find one of us, one
mhm.
elder care planner somewhere. I still think it's worth a call because I bet you that person knows another resource. And so elder care planning is kind of that hopscotch of one to another. And so it's a little bit aggravating at times because you
Mm.
want to be able to get directly to the answer, but there's not enough of that information, enough of those people that provide the services. So call the first one you find and go from there, leapfrog it through. It might take a minute, but it'll be much faster than, trying to figure out the whole industry on your own.
Yeah. So, a little bit about your book, and then there's something else I want to get into, but tell us a little bit about breadcrumbs.
So I called it breadcrumbs from home care to care homes. And I called it breadcrumbs because that's exactly what's happening. People are just getting pieces here and there and not a full story and not a full picture. And so they're collecting all the breadcrumbs, trying to piece together something that, you can't, trying to find the pieces as difficult as it is. So the goal of the book, as I mentioned, was just to educate people in their own time in their own space. They don't have to talk to us, they don't have to talk to anybody else, just take it, just like the resources on our website. And so in breadcrumbs, I really wanted to show caregivers specifically that they're not alone, that we've only had these types of living, like senior living communities. Part of it is we've only had those really since the 60s and they've only been adapting since. So for if you're looking for senior living, we don't have enough generational experience to deal with any of this. And so you need the extra experience. And talking about role reversal and how, you are now sort of parenting your parent. And although people have to tread lightly, that's kind of the role reversal happening. And really just showing people that there are strategies for pretty much anything in elder care, whether you're staying at home and getting care there, whether you're waiting at a long-term care list that has wait lists or retirement, there's strategies for any of it. There's low income strategies, things like that. And so it's to get people to start thinking about which kind of buckets align with their life and to look at the types of strategies because for a very specific group, there's a lot of low income seniors. And so if I can get these strategies to them and their family early, they can plan better because as you can expect, if they're looking for care or to make a move into care, care is expensive. So how do we situate it so that we can get them as long in their home as possible without as much risk? And that's about, looking at your home situation and your safety situation. So there's a lot of different pieces in there, and it's really just, like I said, to show people they're not alone and to give them some actual action items to start looking at.
So we've been looking in this episode, we've been looking in a few different ways. We've been looking at the communication aspect of caring and caregiving, communication in the sense of getting the conversation going, not putting it off, moving forward with it, and understanding where the person is, and certainly engaging with key thoughts such as active listening, knowing when to talk, when not to talk, take the person into consideration about how to work with them in a space that they're comfortable with, that both parties are comfortable with, because it is awkward. And then looking at yourself and looking at Tea and Toast as it is an organization, it is a company, yes, but it's also a wonderful resource to help people. And I'm seeing it as a place that people can come regardless of where you are, that if you've got questions, I really need help, and I really know that I need to have this conversation. I don't know where to start. Or, like you said, at the other end of the spectrum, I've been to I've been to 20, and I agree with you. That's way too many. And I'm
Way
not
too
even in the business, but I've been to half a dozen, say, of senior care facilities, and I don't know where to start. I don't know what to look for, all this kind of stuff. And then we see where you're talking about, really getting into it with elder planning strategies and how important all this is to him. And the thing that we haven't touched on, it could be a whole nother podcast. I know that. And that was and that way back in the beginning of the program a few years ago, I had a wonderful conversation with a gentleman about caregiving and caregivers and the burnout and all the stuff that goes along with caregiving. Where do you start and where do you stop? And where do you say, okay, I can't go, I can't do this anymore. It's time to move on. And it's probably something that you can do with tea and toast is to help that caregiver saying, I recognize that you've helped mom and dad as much as you can, or you've helped dad, or you've helped mom, but maybe it's time to say, um, if I really want them taken care of, I love them, but maybe it's best if I move them on. Does that make sense?
Mhm. A lot of the caregiving things and the burnout is about setting boundaries around what you can and cannot do. And specifically as well, that there's lots of people that aren't, they don't have the caregiver gene. Let's call it that. They're not interested. They don't do it well. It's like they could, do your banking, they could do everything, but like the actual physical care, they may not be interested or can do. And so a lot of people go into burnout because they're overextending themselves, possibly in things that they're not good at or don't want to, or it's just, a burden. And so they're doing it because of expectations of, being the child or whatnot, which is noble. But to stay out of caregiver burnout or to reduce it, it's really about setting boundaries around what you can do or what you're willing to do and understanding that guilt will come either way. So whether you do or you don't, there's always going to be a seam of guilt in there. And to be able to dance with guilt, to really learn that you've set this up, everybody's on the same page. Mom and dad, I can only come and visit you after work for an hour, 3 times a week. Oh, I want you to come every day at lunch. I'm sorry, I can't do that. Is there something else we can look at? And planning with them while you're setting up the boundaries, because I think a lot of us get into burnout when we just keep doing for everybody, and then the age-old saying of our cup not being full. And so the only people that can fill it is ourselves. And
Mm,
so you have to protect your time, your energy, to make sure, or at least to help prevent extended caregiver burnout. Because I feel like it's more of it's not, you're not in burnout or not in burnout. It's a spectrum of burnout.
yeah. What would you want to have people have a takeaway of this episode? There's a good one for you.
I would love if people took to heart that they aren't alone and open the conversations with friends and colleagues and neighbors and things like that to just say, you know what, I'm dealing with this. Have you ever dealt with this before? And it might not always be a yes, but that's only one person. So try it again. Because the thing is that especially in this demographic of what's happening with elder care and whatnot, in Canada, 1 in 4 people are caregivers, coming up to 1 in 2 in a couple of years. We're all going to be caregivers, or we're all going to need caregivers. So it's a very versatile subject. And sometimes you just need to talk to other people, but a lot of the people that we see, or a lot of the people I talk to, just assume that they're the only ones dealing with it. And I can tell you as an expert that you are not.
Mm,
When people come to us for helping navigate different things, I say we have buckets of problem solving, right? Because everybody kind of fits in a bucket of what they're dealing with, advanced dementia or Parkinson's and planning for care or whatever that is. There's certain things that there's strategies for all of it. And so we see it all the time. And so that's why I want people to understand that they're really not alone. They just have to be open enough to start these conversations with others, like we were talking about with the awkward conversations of with elder care with their parents, but also just to really know that your colleagues are probably going through very similar things and they probably could use your support too. So be brave.
yeah. I always ask a question, and that is of my guest, I'll just ask you, what does Amy do to create a better life for herself?
What do I do? I would tell you that I try to pay attention to my energy. And so we talked about at the first how I'm pretty introverted. So I tap into how I'm feeling so that I get to a point in my life at times where I like to go out and I have a little camper. And so I like to take the camper, yeah, out and a couple of nights, just by myself, no pets, no husband, no kid, everybody, because I have realized, and it's through a lot of soul searching that I've realized that I actually am a person who just needs my space and my alone time. And so I can feel when I haven't been able to get that, and I'll take it as much as I can. And the other thing is just to be okay with taking it, and it's okay to take that space. So I've been teaching myself along with my caregivers that taking care of yourself is okay.
That's great. So how do people get in touch with Tea and Toast? What's the best way to do it? You've already mentioned it, but let's rehearse it again.
Absolutely. Well, everything that you need is on teaandtoast.ca, all spelled out. All of the resources, if you need us, our personal services, we can do that. The books there, all sorts of things are there.
That's delightful. And I'm guessing you're probably on social media too. I mean, everybody else is, but
We are, yeah, at Tea and Toast Inc. Sometimes it's Inc. and sometimes it's not, but yeah, you can really readily find us. There's luckily not very many businesses called Tea and Toast, so
no, not many at all.
yeah.
And I asked, we kind of touched on it a minute ago, but any last thoughts that you might have that you'd like to share with our audience today?
I really just thank people for tuning in, really, and putting themselves one step ahead in this planning process and being interested enough to start compiling their information so that they can have confidence in their decision making.
That's great. Amy, this has been a wonderful eye-opening opportunity that we've had together, and being able to broach into some of the discussions that really we need to have, we don't have, and we need to move forward with. And thanks for helping us see the importance of that. And thanks for being a guest on Toward a Better Life.
Thanks so much, Kevin.
Well, that's it for the show. I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you again, Amy, for sharing vital insights into senior care. We certainly do appreciate you sharing your thoughts and your wisdom. You can find links in the show notes to connect with Amy Friesen, her website, and more information about Tea and Toast. Take a look. As I often share, if you're seeking insights and advice on how to create a better life for yourself, and if you'd like to dive into self-care, self-development, distant shamanic work, past life regression work, drop me a line, kevin@towardabetterlife.com, for your free discovery call. You can also visit the website towardabetterlife.com for past episodes, blog entries, ways to enhance your spiritual journey, and food products along the way to assist you on your journey. Just send all your inquiries to me. Please subscribe and follow Toward a Better Life through your favorite podcast platform, and do leave a review on Apple and Spotify podcast. It just takes a second to do it, and it just helps to spread the word about the program. If you've got questions, or if you'd like to share a story, music, prose, if it's an audio file, send it to me as an MP3. Or if you want to be my guest, just write to me, kevin@towardabetterlife.com. That's kevin@towardabetterlife.com. Until next week, enjoy your fruitful journey toward a better life.